Democracy That Delivers is brought to you by the Center for International Private Enterprise. Now to your host.
Hello, everyone. My name is Marie Principe. I'm your host. I'm the Levant Program Director on the Middle East and North Africa team at CIPE. Thank you for listening to Democracy That Delivers. We're pleased to have Dr. Patrick Mardini, CEO of the Lebanese Institute for Market Studies, or LIMS, here with us today. And thank you, Patrick.
Thank you for having me.
It's been almost exactly a year since we had you here with us last time in DC. Thank you again for coming back and visiting. The Lebanese Institute for Market Studies, which Patrick leads, is one of the leading advocates for market-based solutions to the challenges that Lebanon faces, such as currency stabilization, which LIMS championed through its end restrictions and stabilized exchange rate or RACE program last year. So Patrick, since you were here last year, certainly some things in Lebanon have unfortunately stayed consistent in terms of the economic crisis, but there has been some change as well. I'll turn it over to you. I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are on that immediately.
Sure. So on the stability front, on the currency side, we had a large devaluation of the currency since the beginning of the crisis, late 2019. The currency lost 98% of its value. But for the past 4-5 months, we had a stable exchange rate. So that was something new, positive. We have a new acting governor at the central bank, and the acting governor is conducting a sounder monetary policy. Parts of which we discussed actually last year, we recommended last year, like the central bank is not lending any more money to the government because those operations were quite inflationary. And so the new acting governor decided they won't lend money neither in Lebanese pound nor in US dollar. So that was quite positive. Also, the central bank is keeping the money supply stable, right? Some people talked to him to inquire about the currency board, the reform we were trying to advocate for. And he said, listen, I mean, by practice, I am kind of doing a currency board in the sense that I am not lending any money to the government and I am keeping the money supply stable. I only buy and sell US dollar at a fixed exchange rate. When there is excess of dollar in the market, I buy it at the fixed rate and then I resell it at that fixed rate. So I am kind of acting as a currency board. And this is something very positive, I think. We might be able to build on it, see how we can institutionalize this practice instead of having it only as an occasional policy. Another major change was the economic stability that we started to see the past summer. Lebanon was having a massive collapse. It was more like a depression of the economy. The GDP before the crisis was around $54 billion. Today we are around $20 billion. So 60% of the economy vanished, disappeared, right? So this was like the massive drop in the economy. And then we started to see this summer some stability. Tourism picked up. Many visitors came to Lebanon. It was a very nice season. We were expecting a lot of tourists to come back for New Year and Christmas. Now maybe with the instability in the region, it's harder to bring tourists on. But we started to see some stability on the economic front. It's not a recovery. The economy is not picking up. It's more like an L-shaped recession where we had a massive drop and now we are not dropping anymore. It's stabilized. Now I hope the war won't get us, into further decreases. But for now, we've been seeing some stability. So those were two positive changes we had.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to ask you about the potential economic impact on the war in Lebanon in a minute. Before we go to that, last year at this time, President Aoun had stepped down about 2 weeks before our last conversation. Now it's been about a year since we had a president in Lebanon. How is that affecting the economic situation right now?
Right. So Aoun, his tenureship ended basically, and now we have a void in the presidency. And given this, and no, in Lebanon we have a special system where you need 2/3 of the vote to be able to have a president, and the parliament is split 50-50, right? 50 plus, 50 minus, but nobody has 2/3 of the vote. So it seems that we are heading toward a long void, right? Now, the problem is that when you don't have a president, the government becomes an interim government as well. So we have a void in the presidency, we have a void in the government, and even the parliament that would probably be able to legislate. Some interpretation of the constitution says that in the absence of a president, the parliament cannot legislate. The parliament only becomes an electoral body that has only one mission to elect a new president. So even the parliament is like kind of, it's still working. Half of the parties think that they can legislate, and they are, but the other half think that no, it's illegal to legislate within the. So this makes reforms harder to do, right? Because if you don't have a government to sign to reform, if you don't have a parliament, a president to legislate, then reforms are harder to achieve. And that's why the deal with the IMF have been stalling, among other things. Many reforms have been stalling.
And given the current environment, what are LIMS's priorities?
Well, I would say three top priorities. The first one, as I was saying at the beginning of the conversation, try to institutionalize what Mansouri, the current acting governor of the central bank, have been doing, because it brought stability. So there is something to be learned there in order to get some monetary stability. Opening the banking sector to competition in order to allow new banks to come in and do the financial intermediation, give loans, take deposits. Current banks are actually, collapsed, and they are unable to do this work. And the third top priority is to help Lebanon provide basic economic services like electricity, like waste management. With the current crisis, the government does not have the money and is unable to provide electricity. We only have 4 hours of government electricity per day, the massive outages. And we started seeing garbage in the street popping up. So the garbage problem seems to be coming back. And so delivering basic economic services to the population is a top priority. We believe it can be done through facilitating the relation between municipalities and the private sector without going through the government that is unable to do things. So I think that that's a very important axe of work in the upcoming months.
And you all have a program specifically focused on bringing together the business community.
With you guys, yeah.
With us. Can we tell our audience a bit more about that for those listeners who may not be familiar? What are the prospects for engaging local leaders for change, given sort of the frozenness of the national government right now?
Absolutely. So, as I said, we do have this electricity problem in Lebanon. We don't have electricity. We only have 4 hours of official electricity. And usually this gap is filled by private generators, small scale diesel generator. They sell you electricity for a monthly subscription fee. And usually it's very expensive, very noisy, very polluting, bad service. So the cost of a kilowatt hour would be around 50 cents per kilowatt hour. That's like one of the highest in the world. And this high cost of energy is damaging businesses a lot, because the operational cost of businesses is very high because of electricity. If you are an industrial company, you rely heavily on electricity. So how can you compete with 50 cents kilowatt hour cost with electricity? Even if you work in other sectors like agriculture needs irrigation. Irrigation needs electricity. Agriculture needs cooling of those goods that you want to transport, and cooling needs also electricity. So tourism, Lebanon relies a lot on tourism, but tourism needs air conditioning, heating, lighting. All of that needs electricity. Even schools today, the biggest strain to their budget today, schools are closing because the electricity bills capture most of their income and they cannot survive. So electricity is a big problem to all the sectors in Lebanon, and it has been hindering the recovery. Same story with garbage. If you are a touristic country, betting to basically hoping to attract tourists, if you have garbage all over the place, who would come in? Who would enter to a shop if you have garbage? Even employees won't come to the shop if you have garbage. So those things need to be dealt with. The central government cannot deal with them because One, they defaulted on their payment of their debt. They don't have any financing ability. And two, anyway, even if they had in the past, they did not deal with those things easily. So we're trying to work with municipal leaders in cooperation with municipalities in order to solve the problem. And the design we suggested is what we call the user payer model instead of the taxpayer model. So municipalities also have problems in their income because one, they rely on their income on the government, and the government is not paying them their dues. And even if the government paid them their dues, the taxes basically dedicated to municipalities, the value of those taxes dropped with the currency devaluation. So now they don't do anything. So municipalities are not able to supply electricity solution or garbage management solution with their own money. But we do believe that the private sector can, and what the private sector can do is offer those services directly to the population for a certain fee or payment. Like, for example, the private sector can do a solar farm. It has been tried in a town called Tula in the north of Lebanon. The solar farm, which was a private initiative, was coupled with the generator, who was owned by the municipality actually. And now Tula have 24 hours of electricity thanks to this solar farm, this hybrid system, where during the day they get their electricity from the sun, and when you don't have a sun, they switch to the generator. By doing that, they managed to get 24 hours of electricity, and the cost of electricity in Tula is 50% lower than the neighboring towns. So they were able to reduce those operational costs by going to renewable energy and relying on the private sector for the investment. We do think that this is a model and there is a lot of lesson to be drawn from. We think that this model can be replicated in many municipalities in Lebanon. We've been engaging municipal leaders on that. There is a lot of interest and private sector as well. So that's one model where we can solve the electricity problem through renewable energy without going through the central government by working with the private sector and local leaders. Same story with garbage, waste management, right? Historically, Lebanon would take the garbage and throw them in landfills. And those landfills get filled really quickly. And when they are filled, the garbage will come back to the street. Municipalities sometimes burn it, so you convert it to an air pollution unbearable, so bad solution. One solution on that level would be to allow companies, private companies, to come into the municipality and do some waste treatment facilities, right? Where they would send their truck to homes, take the garbage to the factory, and treat the garbage over there. And household would pay a certain subscription fee, monthly subscription fee, to get rid of their garbage. Of course, the subscription fee would be way lower. It might be even zero if the household is actually doing sorting the waste, right? And if the household does not sort the waste, they would need to pay for somebody who would sort it for them. This system would allow to solve the waste problem in Lebanon. However, it needs an involvement from municipalities, because in Lebanon, people they would throw their garbage from the windows on the streets in the public areas instead of paying for somebody to get rid of them, right? So you would need the municipality to have a municipal police that would fine anybody who would throw the garbage on the street.
Some enforcement mechanism.
Absolutely.
Right.
And if they do that, then there would be a market for private businesses to offer those services to households directly. And so we do think that this cooperation between private businesses and municipalities can open the door to solving the waste management problem, to solving the electricity problem, reducing this burden on local businesses, and help them cope with the current crisis and probably, kickstart again.
Now, LIMS organized a series of town halls specifically on these issues with business and municipalities, right? What were some of the takeaways from that? Maybe some lessons learned or highlights?
Absolutely. So we had 3 town hall meetings last month, actually, in October. The first one was in the north of Lebanon, and we had around 100 participants. 1/3 of the participants were actually municipal leaders, so head of municipalities, around 30 president of a municipality from the north of Lebanon. The other third was businesses that might be interested in working with the municipalities on the municipal level. And we had around 10 MPs and representatives of MPs. They were interested in the topic. And around 20 activists, engaged citizens, It's good to have activists and engaged citizens because it would enhance accountability, right? And make sure that somebody represents. I mean, the voice of the population is also heard. And then we did. We had 100 participants. It was very successful, very high turnout. We were expecting 50. We got 100. And it's good to have 100, but then the discussion, you would have less room for discussion. So in the other two town hall meeting in Beirut and in June, we did not invite MPs, because when you have MPs, you will have higher turnout. So we did not invite MPs. We had around 50 participants per workshop, and that was our target. That's what we wanted, in order to have a better discussion between businesses and the municipal leader. We wanted them to talk. We wanted them to figure out solutions and to start working together. Because if MPs are here, then MPs would take most of the discussion, and people would want to talk with them, and you would lose a little bit on what you came here for, which is enhancing the cooperation between municipalities and private business. So those were really good town hall meetings in terms of attendance. And the Beirut and June meetings were after the war started in Gaza and in the south of Lebanon. And despite that, there were a threat that the war would be won, and despite that, people came, municipal leaders and businesses, which shows the interest in the topic, right? Now, you asked me about the lessons. I think that there are three main lessons we can draw from those town hall meetings. The first one is related to the legal framework. There was a big uncertainty in Lebanon, in the sense that, are we allowed to sell electricity, produce and sell electricity, if we have a government monopoly on electricity, which is the national electricity company called EDL, Électricité du Liban, right? So this monopoly would, prevent people from engaging in those solar farm projects if they are not allowed to do that. So we, and thanks to the CIPE support, basically to your support, we were able to hire as policy analyst one of the top experts on the energy sector in Lebanon. His name is Ghassan Baidoun. He used to be the Director General of Investment at the Ministry of Energy. He is known in Lebanon for basically highlighting corruption in the ministry, for standing up against the minister when they wanted to do, some corrupt schemes. And, he's a very honorable person. And so now he's part of our team, and he really knows the legal framework very well. I mean, he understands it because he lived it throughout his career, and he knows the ins and outs. And he actually explained two things which are very interesting and very novel and very interesting to know. The first one is that in Lebanon, in the law, we don't have a monopoly on electricity. We had a monopoly before 2002, but we had a law in 2002 that repealed EDL monopoly. So this idea that there is a monopoly of electricity, it exists in practice, but the law repealed it in 2002. Now, the way new companies enter the market, it's through a complicated process where you should have a regulatory authority that the government never appointed. So it's a technical thing why we have a monopoly, but it's not a legal thing. And that's important. So you are allowed to have multiple producers of electricity, no problem.
I mean, that's amazing. Just that revelation right there, that there's the potential for competition in an industry that's been fraught with corruption for decades, right?
And inoperational. And,
yeah.
Right. And I mean, the electricity sector is responsible of around $40 billion of national debt. So half of the current crisis is due to electricity, right? And the main reason is that the government is mismanaging the sector, wasting a lot of money on the national electricity company, and refusing other actors to come into the game. And clearly the law allows for other actors to come into the game. So that's one. The other revelation on the legal framework was a law that was voted in 2018 on public-private partnership, PPP, the PPP law. Now, the PPP law of 2018 defined the entities, the public entities that are allowed to do a PPP, a public-private partnership with the private sector. And one of those entities were actually the municipality. So the municipality were given an autonomy and allowed to work with the private sector. So now we have those two laws. The first law allows competition in electricity. The second law allows a municipality to work with the private sector. If you put them together, you have something interesting happening here. Now, of course, the legal framework is very complicated. to get those things done would take a very complicated procedure that our policy analyst explained. And many municipalities and businesses were interested in pursuing the conversation with him, and he will eventually help them navigate this legal framework. I'm not saying that it is crystal clear that, so it's more like a gray area if you are allowed to invest in electricity. But gray area is good because it means that you are not banned from doing that. Now the law needs more clarification to allow it explicitly, but even within the current framework of the law, some things can be done, right? And that has been a very important revelation.
That at least creates the opportunity for conversations around how things can change, because that understanding of it being a monopoly has been persistent even since 2002.
Absolutely, and it depends also on the municipalities, and that's the advantage of talking with multiple municipalities instead of talking with one central government or one central. Because some municipality would say, "Oh no, gray area is not good enough. We won't touch it unless it is like 100% clear." And other municipalities would say, "Oh yeah, that's good enough for me. I'm gonna do." Tula did it, right? With electricity, other municipalities can do it. So actually, here it will depend on the personality of the president of the municipality. Either he would say, "Oh, it's not my job," or he would say, "Well, you know what? If the law gives me some leeway, then I'm gonna do it by all means." And those are the municipalities who would be interested in encouraging and connecting them to private businesses who would be able to do this work for them. So I think that's the discovery process we are doing through our program.
Oh, and you said there was a third revelation about the sector that you learned.
Yes. So there is a big interest from municipalities in attracting private businesses. They are keen. They are, they would love to have a lot of businesses coming in, right? In electricity, in garbage, etc. The problem is that after years of crisis, after 4 years of crisis, it's hard for businesses to continue because businesses have been damaged. They lost their money at the bank, so they lost their capital, their saving. To invest, it's harder for them, and activity dropped. 60% of the economy disappeared, right? So businesses are way weaker after this crisis. They have less ability to invest and to engage. So although we had a large number of municipalities interested in attracting businesses, the number of businesses who were interested in going and doing work with the municipalities was lower. We had probably 5 or 6 businesses. But 5 or 6 businesses is good. If you can have those people connect them with municipalities, then if you can have 4, 5, 6, even one business can do several projects, then we can create a dynamic. And this was important to highlight the weakness of the private sector today in Lebanon, given the difficulty and the harshness of the crisis. And maybe here also there is some there should be some way to engage maybe expats who have fresh capital outside Lebanon, to encourage them. And I know that there are some initiatives in that direction. Some experts are trying to find legal way to help with solar farms in Lebanon. So in order to fill this gap left by the weakened private businesses, the aid community, USAID, European Union, other also can do that. Well, maybe simply provide some loans for businesses to be able to do those solar farms, those waste management facilities, because currently the banking system is collapsed. So even if businesses are interested, they won't be able to find financing. So you don't need to donate the money. Just if you can give it to them as a loan, it can be an interesting way for everybody to kickstart those projects. And there have been also a third probably element. Agriculture seems to emerge in each one of those town halls. There is a growing interest from the business community in exporting some agricultural products in Lebanon. And there is a growing interest from municipalities to connect their farmers to businesses who are able to take those products and eventually export them. So we might also look into connecting businesses with municipalities slash farmer in order to facilitate this relation. There is some interest in this kind of relation. It's a bit beyond what we were discussing, but it emerged at each time, and so maybe there is something to be done there.
Well, it's certainly heartening to hear about the opportunities for reform still, and it being more concentrated at the local level certainly seems to make sense. I'm going to shift gears just a little bit in the time that we have left. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't ask about the economic impact of the war right now on Lebanon, and so how that's been impacting business and the economy, especially with the holidays coming up and tourism being so critically important for Lebanon. How is the situation right now affecting that?
Absolutely. So Lebanon relies extensively on tourism. Around 26% of Lebanon's current account receipt come from tourism. There has been a study from Goldman Sachs, I think, saying that if tourism revenue fall by 10 to 30% during the war, then Lebanon GDP would be cut by 10%. So minus 10% growth if you lose 30% of your tourism. That's massive.
And that's after already a 50% loss over the last few years since the start of the
crisis.
Right,
absolutely. Right. So, the L-shaped recession where you think you stabilized on a low level, but you would actually go to even lower level because of that. So it would be very good. And actually, we started seeing the impact of the war or of the risk of a wider war on the Lebanese economy, even without actually having a wider war. The negative impacts are starting to show. I mean, we were expecting a great summer. We had a great summer. Tourism income were exceptional, and we were expecting a good season for the New Year, Christmas, tourists coming back. Now we are seeing a lot of cancellation, right? So arrivals in Lebanon decreased by 33%, and departure increased by 28%. If you look at the airport, so people is leaving, no one's coming in, right? So clearly we have a slowdown in tourism. Hotel occupancy rate is between 5 to 10%. Like 90% of the rooms are empty. That's horrible, right? Nightlife declined, activity declined by 90%. Car rental declined by 90%. Restaurants activities declined by 80%.
It was just throughout the country. These are the stats,
yes.
Or are they specific to the south?
No, throughout the country. Those numbers are collected by the Chamber of Commerce of Beirut and Mount Lebanon, not the south, actually. And you see this drop in activity because if people are scared that a war would happen, then they won't come to Lebanon and be stuck in the middle of a war, right? They will cancel their reservation. They won't go out eat in restaurants. They want to hide their cash in case of emergency, etc., etc. So there is a big impact on tourism. There is also an impact on the industrial sector as well. We've seen a decline since the beginning of the war, between 30 to 35%. The demands on those sector shrink because people who would buy for them. So exporting industries have their clients abroad, but those clients are afraid that those industries won't be able to deliver the product in case of a war, so they canceled their orders. Many factories left Lebanon to other countries because they don't want to be shut down because of war. So it's a big the risk of war has a lot of costs, right? So imagine the war itself, right? The same thing on the commercial sector. Demand for luxury goods decreased between 50 to 70%. Insurance sector, a big contraction. Customers stop paying their premiums because they want to preserve liquidity. There is a big pressure on the central bank foreign exchange reserve because the central bank buys dollar that comes into Lebanon from tourism in peak time, basically, and try to sell those dollars when you have a slowdown. If no dollar is coming in and the dollar is going out, then we will have a problem in the balance of payment. That would create a new risk of currency devaluation. Right? So those are the risks that are looming now. If the war expands, of course, that would be very dramatic. Destruction of infrastructure, loss of a human life, people won't be able to work, they will stay at home. And since we are in a crisis, companies cannot pay people to stay at home because companies lost their money at the banks. So people who stay at home, they won't have any income to live out of. So, I mean, it would be very, very bad. I don't think it's at all in the interest of anyone for this war to take place.
So the threat of war is already problematic enough. And then, of course, on top of that, if it actually does
that would
expand,
it would be a big blow, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we'll certainly keep our fingers crossed that the opportunities that LIMS is working on are really is what continues. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I do think that now in Lebanon, many people are focused on the war, less on the economic challenge. Since the beginning of the crisis, the main focus was on economic challenges. But I do think that, the spillover, the problems created by the war, by the threat of war even if like in 1 month, 2 months, everything ends, well, it would have enhanced the current problems. It will enhance the problems of the balance of payment. It will make it harder for the government to produce electricity, to resolve the garbage problem, right? So it would make those problems that we are currently working on even more pressing, right, to solve. So although people don't see it yet, but once the water stills, I think that the economic problem would gain even more importance, and they will become more urgent to solve, right? So it's very important to have a clear design for the solution for those problems eventually.
Which LIMS is doing. You are very
With your
active
help?
very active in local media and making sure that these issues stay at the top of the agenda. And one of our colleagues said earlier, commended you for this, and I want to echo it in the podcast, is that you always stay very solution oriented. And with everything being so challenging in the environment that it is, that's something that we can always count on with you, Patrick, is that you are here ready to offer solutions.
Absolutely.
And your work is very needed.
Thank you so much. We acknowledge the severity and the intensity of the problem, and we do that. But we also go beyond that and suggest solution, given the difficulties of the framework. And hopefully those solutions will be implemented. If we manage to bring 24 hours of electricity at a lower cost to 1 village, 2 village, 3 villages, that's already a lot, right? Maybe you won't be able to solve it for the entire country, but progressively by trial and error, I think there is much to be done there.
Great. Well, thank you again for joining us, Patrick. Thank you to our listeners, and catch us on the next episode.
Listen and subscribe to CIPE's Democracy That Delivers, wherever you get your podcasts.